There's a lot going on in this movie.
It was like I was watching it for the first time.
I like this movie.
It has a special place in my heart.
Very close to my heart.
This was a good one.
I want to like this movie.
What? Seriously?
I loved it.
Very flat, kind of boring.
This movie blows me away. This movie turns me on.
Terrible. It is terrible. All these keys everywhere. Influences, baby.
Huge, huge fan.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Hello and welcome out there in Spooky Land, YouTube, podcast, all that fun stuff. This is Johnny Has the Keys, and you have either stumbled upon us or are following us. And either way, we're glad you're here. It is one of our favorite times of the year. We have been doing this podcast for quite a few seasons now, and October is always a fun time to delve into some darkness and some fun that Tim usually throws at me. If you are new to us, we'd love to hear how you found out about us. Was it through social? Was it just stumbling? Did you Google us? Did AI tell you that you need to come and listen or watch us? Whatever. Leave a comment down below. Subscribe, ding, ring the bell, do all that kind of stuff. And if you're returning, so glad you're with us. This is a podcast where we examine genres, science fiction and horror, key influences on those particular topics of the week, and then things that they in turn influence down the road. My name is David. As I already mentioned, Tim, my co-conspirator in this funness that we've been doing. Tim, what have you been doing? You got a ghostly cabin behind you there.
Wow. Well, it is October.
It is.
And we are in the spooky season. I am still catching up on stuff that has been out for a little while. And we usually delve into a genre topic to break the ice, so to speak, before we go into our main feature. And I happened to catch a movie on Shudder called Infested.
Ugh. I am not liking the poster even. What is that? Oh, no. Those of you who listen to us on the podcast, Tim has brought up an image of somebody with an open mouth screaming and things are crawling on him. Why would you even open your mouth?
I don't know. Because it makes a good poster. I guess it worked on you.
Oh, yeah, man.
This is a French movie, and it came out around the same time the movie Sting came out, which I believe is an Australian movie.
Yes.
So spider movies have been with us here lately, and Sting did not do well. I predicted that because it looked too comedic to me. This movie got much stronger reviews, and it was on Shudder, so I decided to give it a watch. And if I had to sum this movie up in a nutshell, it is Wreck meets Arachnophobia. Basically, people trapped in an apartment building, only instead of zombies, it's a venomous, very fast, what would you say is the word? Multiplying villain. It's French, though, which is funny because Wreck is Spanish. So you had a Spanish zombie-infested apartment building, and now you have a French spider-infested apartment building. It's pretty ridiculous in places when it comes to logic, but there are plenty of scares in this movie if you don't mind reading subtitles. It's directed by a French guy I don't really know and stars a bunch of French people that I am unfamiliar with. The synopsis is: passionate about exotic animals, Caleb brings home a venomous spider, but it accidentally slips away. Soon, residents of the apartment building are battling an army of deadly, rapidly reproducing, that's what I was looking for, spiders. It gets 95% on Rotten Tomatoes with 59 reviews. I would knock it down to about an 80 because of logic. There's some logic issues, but it's a popcorn movie. We talked about this, a week or so back with Pitch Black. It was last week. It's a fun ride. So if you can handle French subtitles, I say suspend your disbelief and hop on that roller coaster.
Wait, the subtitles are in English though, right?
I'm sorry, did I say Spanish? I meant French. And
No,
yeah,
you
the
said French
subtitles are in
subtitles
English.
of a French-speaking movie.
It's a
Okay, great.
French speaking movie with English subtitles. There you go. No, you don't have
And
to read French.
so are these eight-legged freaks like normal size spiders? Are they the size in that poster where they're like 6 inches of freaking foot
Yeah,
span?
it's
Or
more
they,
like arachnophobia. It's not like Sting, where it's a giant spider. They're not average size spiders by any means. I would say they're not as fat, but they're probably as big as a tarantula.
okay.
Like what you see on that poster.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. So I could probably handle that. That's not puppy dog sized spiders. I can handle that.
You know what? Just wait 2 years because America will remake it.
I'm sure they will. Yeah. Yeah.
You know they will because it's
Somebody will
popular.
remake it. Yep. Yep. So true. Okay, Infested. Sounds
But
sounds
yeah, that's what I did in my genre week.
sounds interesting. I had to do a recap myself because I'm finally getting around on my list to Rings of Power. So mine is not very intrusive because or lengthy because I just started the new season. So the new season came out a few months ago. I couldn't remember a lot of the details from season one. So I had to do that brief scan, click through and look at and go, oh, Numenor. Yeah, okay, I remember that. Oh yeah, Isildur. Yeah, but Isildur died. How could he die? Because that makes no sense. Yada yada. But anyway,
You were describing what's going to happen to me when I see the sequel to Dune. I'm going to
oh
be
yeah,
like,
you're going to have to
who
do
is
the same
this?
thing and go back and who is this? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I still haven't watched Dune 2 either. But the premiere of season 2 was pretty good. I have to admit, I love the production values of this series. Their costume design is great. Their lighting is great. Scenic works. It's just they're really futzing with Tolkien. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. The Tolkien purists are all over here online going horrible, 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 terrible. And the other fans on the other side are going, I don't understand what's going on. I'm not sure because they throw in these characters and we're supposed to know who they are from Tolkien lore. Like if it says, well, for example, Galadriel is the lead, of course, but you'll bring in like a character that you should know from Lord of the Rings, but writing it like you should know, rather than any explanation of who that character is. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. We just
So,
had this conversation very similarly with what I was talking about with Interview with the Vampire.
yes, yeah, offline when we were talking about that. So,
Mm-hmm.
so you have to be really careful in your writing that you're not pandering in a bad way, but also so that you are at least informing and helping so that those who don't know your mythos can follow along or catch up pretty quick. So I think they're struggling in that, but we'll see what the season looks like. I wasn't totally disappointed with season one. I think there were some issues that I struggled with, but it wasn't as bad as other seasons of
My
different
physical
shows.
therapist is a big nerd, and his brother works there too. And when I'm there doing my physical therapy for the surgery I had, they tag team me talking superheroes, horror movies, science fiction, whatever. And I'm like, I'm talking about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and they're like talking about Rings of Power. So I know they like it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and like I said, a couple of my friends who are Tolkien-esque and like Tolkien do like it. They see what they're doing, basically taking, because this is essentially the plot in a nutshell is this is the birth of Sauron. This is how Sauron, this is before the rings were created.
Okay.
As
So
a
they're
matter
doing
of fact.
it's Maleficent only with Soren.
Sure. Yeah. Great key. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great reference there. Basically, the end of season one is the forming of the Rings of Power. And there's this really great scene with Galadriel. It's not giving anything away, and you know what's going to happen. But there's this great scene with Galadriel where she goes to the elf that's creating the rings, and she says, "You can't just make one. You have to make three." And he looks at her and goes, "Why three?" And she goes, "One will be corrupt. Two will create division and jealousy." And the other character there at the time goes, "And three will create balance." She said, "Right. So we have to have three." And I thought,
Decent
yeah, that's
logic.
very Tolkien. That's very
Yeah.
true,
Mhm.
So, but anyway, that's what I did on my genre week, which does not lead at all any way to segue into our topic today,
Well,
other than
yeah, spiders.
it is about magic.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. There's no spiders, but it's filled with magic. And we are going to talk about a little movie from 1978 called Magic.
Was this a little movie? I have that as my first question. I
Um,
didn't look at what it did box office wise or whatever, but
I didn't either, but it seems like it should be a big movie. And I was only 13 when it came out, so it wasn't like me running to the theater to see it. So, and I wouldn't have known what the returns were as far as
yeah.
what it did. Before we go into this, I just want to say I've been going back and listening to the last episodes of season 6, which I like, and there's a lot of modern stuff. And this season again is not filled with a lot of movies that are on the 1001 movies you must see before you die, but there is a huge chunk of the season that is 1970s, like 10, which is a quarter of our season spread
Yeah.
out. And a lot of these are like comfort food to me. They are movies I love going back to, despite the flaws, what have you. And you and I have talked for years, people that are listening out there will know this, about this particular movie and how we can't wait to do it because we remember it so fondly. I still like it. And the reason I think we remember it fondly is because of the commercial, which got yanked in some places for being too terrifying.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Did you watch it? Did you go back and watch it before?
Of course. Of course.
The trailer is great, folks. If you don't know, it's basically just that face in the poster that you see talking to the camera. And he says,
Abra Cadabra.
Abra Cadabra. I sit on his knee, Presto-Chango, and now he is me. Hocus Pocus, we take her to bed. Magic is fun. We're dead. And then the eyes roll
white,
in the head, and it shows like the credits of the movie, like brought to you by whatever. And then right before the camera goes away, the eyes come back down and look left, and you're like, wait a minute, that thing is alive. It is the creepiest trailer. But
excellent idea. Great marketing.
Yeah, awesome. And there's a lot of good people behind this. We'll get into production.
It's interesting you brought that up because it got me thinking horror in general. The 60s, horror was still recovering from the 50s, where it was melded with science fiction a little bit, but you had Hammer and you had all of that coming out of the 50s into the 60s, and more, I guess, classic monsters and monster type movies in the 60s.
I mean, there was a resurgence with Hammer in the late 50s, early 60s of right. Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy.
And the 80s is known as the slashers.
And it came in the latter part of the decade as well, if you consider movies like Halloween and Friday the 13th.
And Halloween was 79, right? Wasn't it?
78. Same year as this.
So what I think you and I appreciate and people of our age appreciate about the 70s was, in cinema in general, 70s was the decade of the auteurs. I've read a lot of essays and books and everything else about that. This was the Spielberg, Coppola, Lucas, all of these film lovers who had these visions, pushing the studio system away and saying, this is the movie I want to make. And people saying it's not marketable, it'll never work. That little science fiction thing, you really want to make a movie like that? And now look at what it's created. And all these visionaries, gritty movies, Scorsese and Taxi Driver and Godfather and all of that. Serpico on one end.
Schlesinger, yeah.
Correct. All of these incredible auteurs. I think horror was the same way. They were trying all of these different things, from The Omen to The Sentinel to well, the magic, and then
Well,
later
all right,
on
first
into
of all, let me stop you.
Halloween.
You just mentioned three that were big budget, though. Three, the
Correct.
Sentinel, Magic, and the Omen were all big budget. I think the auteurs in the horror world were the low budget ones, like John Carpenter, George Romero,
Yep.
and those guys. Since the movies were so cheap, they basically had creative control. So they were onto it before mainstream cinema was onto it, kind of, if you think about it.
Yeah. And whereas in the slasher genre, you tend to end up with whatever gimmick you're going to give the multi-killer this particular movie. Oh, he's in your dreams. Oh, he's the boogeyman. Oh, he's a psychological killer. But what is that going to be? I think they were grasping it, especially ephemeral horror a lot, whether like the Omen, that's the Antichrist, or the Sentinel, there's a demon, and it's again a witch or an
It's a
Antichrist sort of
Satanism,
thing.
or it's something to do with hell. Yeah, yeah.
Right. And this is like an ode back to Hitchcockian horror, I
Very,
think.
very much so.
Today, but what I say all that just saying that what I loved about it was really didn't know what to expect in the 70s when we went to see a horror movie. It could be this monster creature, or it could be a Satanist, or it could be this, and you didn't know. And they were trying different things.
Right.
So,
And this movie walks that line between horror movie and thriller. So it fits perfectly for our podcast. But a lot of today's audience, I don't think they would think this is a horror movie. Although it's got horrific elements.
What would they call it?
I don't know. A thriller, I guess. If you're talking some hardcore horror people that like X or The Conjuring or something of that nature, there's nothing really supernatural about this movie. This is a psychological thriller, like you said, like Psycho.
Yeah, but screw a bunch of Annabelle and all that crap. This is a lot scarier than that.
It is, unlike I've not seen Annabelle, but I'm assuming that doll comes to life. And in this one, he appears alive, but he's really not. He's just a ventriloquist dummy. A brief synopsis, because we're teasing all you folks out there that may have not seen it, and if you're younger,
have you
may
not seen this movie? Go watch it.
Yeah, you need to go watch it because it's still a good movie. It holds up. We have Corky, who is a failed magician, and we open with him in a club doing card tricks. The audience is very sparse. They're rude. They're laughing at their own jokes and talking amongst themselves and not even paying any attention to him. And he is told by his mentor that he needs a gimmick. A few years later, we see him, he's successful because now he's not only doing magic, but he's also doing a ventriloquist act. And an agent is in the, what would you call it, the bar or wherever he is performing.
Nightclub,
basically trying to talk a TV executive into giving him a role or whatever. The time, one of my griefs about this is time is not really well shown as far as passing in this. But he ends up becoming famous. He ends up getting a TV deal, and he doesn't want to do the TV deal because he knows he'll have to take a medical examination. Mm-hmm. And it is hinted at a little bit early on that something's not quite right because he's having conversations with this ventriloquist dummy, and he doesn't want people to find out. So when the agent says, look, you got to do this, I'm coming over, he decides to leave town. He goes to the Catskills, goes to this lake that he grew up near, I guess, and it is being managed by an old girlfriend from high school. And they start up a little affair, I guess you would say, because they never messed around in school, but she is married and her husband is away.
Mm-hmm.
And and things start seeming like, oh, everything's going to be great. They're in love. She's going to leave her husband. They're going to go off. But then all of a sudden the agent finds the place. The agent sees that he is not right. and is going to wants him to see a doctor. And as he leaves, of course, he gets murdered. Then the ex-husband comes back and he's an obstacle as well. And he eventually gets murdered. And Fats is an obstacle because Fats is jealous of the woman that's taking Corky away from him. So Fats becomes a problem as well, the dummy himself, believe it or not. And things spiral into an unhappy ending. And I'm not going to say anymore, I don't think. What do you think?
Well, that's good. That's a good
Okay.
synopsis, actually, the whole thing.
One of the reasons this movie was so successful was because of that trailer. Because had I been of age to see an R-rated movie, I would have been in that theater after I saw this commercial.
And that poster.
Yeah.
Too. The poster was great.
Yeah.
I have that poster. I own that poster.
Awesome.
So, do you remember the first time you saw it? I assume you saw it on VHS, not television.
No, I think I saw the edited television version. I'm pretty sure it came on like ABC Movie of the Week, and they wouldn't have really had to edit much. There's one scene where you see Anne Margaret's breast, and then there's a little bit of blood when he bludgeons Burgess Meredith with the puppet.
Yep.
But there's not a lot of gore in this at all. I imagine the one that aired on television was not heavily edited. So that's probably where I saw it.
I remember seeing it, but it was in like a rerun. So it was like in a second run, not a drive-in, but it was in a second play theater in Knoxville, and I went and saw it.
Cool.
I think that was in late 79, early 80.
Yeah.
But
yeah, movies used to do that. Halloween came out in 78, but I didn't see it till 79. It's like it came around again the next Halloween or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I loved it, of course. And you've always known that it's one of my favorites for so many reasons. There's a lot to like about this particular film. I think the casting is great. I think the performances are good. Richard Attenborough's direction is really strong. The writing, of course, but it's Hopkins. Hopkins is, I mean, I had seen him in Lion in Winter. I'd seen that because I'd seen it on television one night. And of course, it's theater and it's great and it's Goldman and really good. And I had seen him in QB7 where he played a Nazi. And it's really good.
I've never even heard of that.
QB7 was Leon Uris, and it was the first, after Roots, it was the first really next big mini series on television. It was like 3 nights, a 3-night event.
I seem to remember seeing pictures of him in a Nazi uniform.
And basically it is a tangent of apt pupil. It's somebody who recognizes the old guy from down the street and says he was a commandant at one of the death camps.
Okay.
So they arrest him, and it's his trial at Queen's Bench 7, which is hence the title QB7. And okay, it's 80 years old or whatever. You should have seen it by now, or 50. He is this sweet little innocent doctor guy that you love and everything else until the very last hour when everything starts falling apart, and he literally falls apart on the stand and turns into this maniacal monster.
And did they ever show him in a uniform?
Yeah, they have flashbacks.
I was going to say, I think I've seen a picture of him young in a Nazi uniform from some movie. Okay, that must be it.
And he basically loses his marble. It's a great sequence of him just saying, and they deserved it, and Heil Hitler.
Well, I remember, and I know we would talk about this normally in cast, but I remember being so impressed with his performance, even as a 13-year-old kid, when I saw this movie, that when I heard he was going to play Hannibal Lecter, I was like, oh, well, that's perfect. Because he is just that good. He is probably one of the better actors we've ever had.
Ever. Yeah.
Ever. People say Laurence Olivier. I'm like, I think Anthony Hopkins would be above that, maybe.
I've always agreed. I've always said that. I liked Olivier, and I thought Olivier was great in theater and on film, both. Hopkins is too. I just think Hopkins is better. I think he's better with his accents. I think he's better with his realism. He's not afraid to try things and do things. And plus the fact that he's the master of the micro expression. perfect.
And stealing a scene. I mean, he could steal a scene just with an eye flick.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I
Yeah.
mean. These micro expressions he does.
Yeah.
He's what I call a thinking actor. I can see the wheels turn when he acts. One of the ones that isn't that is one of your least favorite, which is a Tom Cruise. He's the other way. Everything is impulse, instinct. I do it now because I'm so good at it. And that's not, Hopkins is so much more of a conflicted characters.
He
that
shows
plays.
vulnerability even when there is none.
Yeah.
Like with
And he's
even
great with these, he's great with these conflicting characters.
Yeah. He's very vulnerable in this, but in something like Silence of the Lambs, you rarely see Hannibal Lecter vulnerable, and yet you still feel for him in places. Yeah.
The Bounty, when he plays this conflicted captain, because he plays Bly in The Bounty, that's a great performance too. So anyway, he's really good at that. Sorry to get into cast so quick, but
I know. We'll get back to him.
He is one of the biggest things about this movie.
He is. And he's so young in it. Production, though, you mentioned Richard Attenborough was the director. Richard Attenborough was more of an actor than a director. However, he was a director of Shadowlands, Chaplin, and Gandhi. And from what I understand, he did this movie to get funding for Gandhi, I think.
Correct. He did this movie and A Bridge Too Far. In payment, he got to do Gandhi.
And for you folks out there that don't know what I mean as far as him being an actor, well, we covered a movie that he's in last season called Jurassic Park. He is Mr. Hammond, the owner of the park. But he's multi-talented. He can act and he can direct. And he's got a multi-talented brother who is a documentary maker, David Attenborough. Yeah. Mike Nichols briefly considered directing this movie, as did Norman Jewison, as did Steven Spielberg. All three of those guys were considered to make this. Well, Mike Nichols considered and I guess turned it down. Steven was courted to direct it, and he was going to cast Robert De Niro as Corky, which is interesting, I think, to think of Spielberg doing this movie with De Niro. But Norman Jewison was going to do it, and he actually met a real ventriloquist named Jay Johnson. But Norman Jewison wanted Jack Nicholson to do this part. I'm like I said, we're segueing the cast, and I don't even mean to, but I'm talking about directors. Okay. And Jack Nicholson refused to do it because he didn't want to wear a hairpiece, which I think is kind of admirable.
And I read one counter essay to that said that was not true, that he really just didn't want to do the part, but that the myth has developed of a toupee, because that seems odd for me, like you said, for Jack too.
Well, and if he had done that, it would have been Cuckoo's Nest, Magic, The Shining. He would have been Crazy Man in 3 movies in a row, and that would have been some severe pigeonholing. So it's probably good for him to sidestep, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and I think that was maybe what he was thinking, whether his agent was or not.
Right. Now, you mentioned the writer, William Goldman. He's one of Hollywood's, if he's not the most prolific, he is certainly the most well-known and respected screenwriter, probably in Hollywood.
Definitely, yes.
And he also wrote books, and he wrote the book Magic before he wrote the screenplay. He adapted his own novel. But we've covered him in movies like Misery and The Stepford Wives. However, he did other well-known movies like Marathon Man, which we could technically cover on our podcast now because that's a good thriller. And The Princess Bride, which is fantasy, so we could cover that as well.
Well, another one's All the President's Men, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Right. He's got quite... He did Chaplin for Attenborough later on.
Yeah. He's just a knockout screenplay writer. And
great theater writer, too. He's one of the triple threats. He does novels, he writes for theater, and he writes for screenplays.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because Richard Attenborough is a threat in other areas as well. So they're both very multi-talented people. And then Jerry Goldsmith did the music, and I love the music in this movie. I think it's fantastic.
It is one of his best scores, and so underrated. A lot of people don't mention this from a scoring perspective, but it's really good.
It is.
The fact that he can take a 3-note Or two note, even the wah, 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 wah,
Mhm.
wah, on the harmonica every time we just get a glimpse of Fats, and you
Mhm.
just immediately get chilled, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Why would a harmonica be scary? But it is.
Right, right.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
He has scored or worked on scores of over 300 movies. And I have lost count over how many we've covered, but I think I left off at like 10. We have done at least 10 Jerry Goldsmith scored movies.
Yep.
So, and with Spielberg, we've probably done almost as many John Williams as well. But yeah, Jerry Goldsmith adds a huge, like I said, it's the sum of the parts, and every part in this movie's good. Even the minor people in it are good.
Hmm. Definitely.
So, to prepare for his role, though, Anthony Hopkins learned magic tricks and studied the art of ventriloquism. He's very convincing at it. He
If
learned to
you,
project his voice
yeah,
and manipulate.
if you go on YouTube, you can see interviews with him, like with Dick Cavett and other people doing ventriloquism, literally doing it, and magic. He learned that as well. He learned card tricks. He learned sleight of hand. Even in the short scene where he's in the taxi driving to the Catskills, he's doing the whole coin across your fingers deal that magicians do for dexterity, where the coin flips and then comes back around your fingers. And I saw him, I watched one of those, and he said he started the ventriloquism training by putting a pencil in his mouth and biting down on it and doing all the dialogue. That's how he
Okay.
started learning. And I thought, oh, that's genius. That's
Yeah, it
really
is.
smart,
It is very
because it's
smart.
keeping your jaw straight so you can do your voice.
Now tell.
I'm gonna tell. That's what, that's one of the ones. Did you see the comment about the first time you saw the puppet?
He took the puppet like with him somewhere to practice and then ended up like calling somebody to come get it because he was like freaking out.
Yeah, he was training with the ventriloquist. I forgot the ventriloquist's name, sadly,
Right.
but I'm sure we could look it up. But he was training with him, and the he called him a figure. The ventriloquist in the interview I watched only refers to it as a figure. It's not a doll, and it's not a
A
dummy.
dummy.
It's a figure. So he said, but the figure he had all of the same accoutrements as Fats, with the eyebrows and the upper lip would raise
Yeah,
and
it's
all
very
that.
intricately designed. I've never seen
Correct.
one with that many facial expressions.
Yeah, it's not just the jaw going like a,
It's
yeah.
eyebrows and things like that as well.
Yeah.
Eyes. Hmm.
And so he had been rehearsing with that for a few weeks. Meanwhile, they were building Fats. And of course, Attenborough and the studio and everybody wanted Fats to look like Anthony Hopkins. So they designed it like that. So the first time he saw it was the day that he was taking it home. And he took it home. The ventriloquist guy says that he got a call at like 3 a.m. from Anthony Hopkins saying, get this damn thing out of my house. If it's not out of my house, I'm going to throw it in the fucking canyon. I can't take it. It's scaring the shit out of me. And so he called Attenborough, and Attenborough actually had to drive to Anthony Hopkins'
I did read
house.
that. Yeah.
And later on talked to ventriloquist and said, yeah, I calmed him down and everything else. But yeah, he was having some issues with it.
It's a very unique doll. Fats is a very unique doll. We have seen ventriloquists before, and I've never seen one that has a head that large. Madam is more of a puppet, but he's also a ventriloquist, the guy that did Madam.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And her head is much smaller, even though she's got more distinct features on her face. When I watch him do this, I'm like, how in the hell is he making that puppet move its eyes, move its eyebrows, move its lips, move its mouth and its ears? There must be a million levers in there. And did he master all that? Or is that
Yes.
special effects?
Okay. Wow. Good question. I'm glad you asked. A lot of the scenes, he is not actually manipulating Fats. That's the ventriloquist behind the couch. Or at one point in the interview, the ventriloquist said, or I had to be just crouching down right behind Anne Margaret's butt, which is not a bad place to be at all, by the way.
That's funny.
But so he is manipulating Fats for Anthony Hopkins for a lot of the scenes, because he just has more dexterity. He's just better at it and knows all those levers and all those things and what they want. And it also, but not, it's not an and, it's a but. One of the things that Hopkins said in an interview was it took a lot of coordination between the two of them because he never wanted to look like it was doing it by itself.
So he's basically just moving his arm a little and delivering lines.
Right. But doing the voice with, as a ventriloquist would, because you can see his throat go, you can see the tightening of his cheeks and stuff.
But do you
So
think
he
that
is,
a lot of that was dubbed later?
supposedly no. Two different behind the scenes things I read said no, a lot of that was live on set recording.
Wow, that's impressive.
That he could really, and it was part of Hopkins' whole process. He said he wanted to be, he said if it's never not that, then we'll lose the believability.
Right.
He did not like that one scene where there's only one scene where Corky moves and where Fats moves and Corky's not near him.
His
And
eyes move.
And that's his eyes move when he gets up off the sofa and moves away. And it's before the full break.
Right.
And
And
Hopkins,
Richard Attenborough said it was a mistake, but he left it in there because he didn't think people would notice.
Yep, he didn't think people would notice. And later on, the justification from Goldman was it works because that's Corky's snap. Corky's gone then. Fats is really in control. That's how he makes him do all the spin around, touch the ceiling, get a knife.
But then you have all
Yeah.
the Star Trek conspiracy theorists or whatever that say, "Oh, is he alive? Maybe he really is alive."
But I think that's a great choice by everybody involved in this production is the fact that no, by the end of it, this is a disease movie. This is a mental illness movie.
It's mental
not a
illness,
supernatural movie. Yeah.
It's Psycho, basically. It's very similar. That's one of my keys, obviously. Before we get into scenes, I wanted to mention one other thing. You heard me and David quote that trailer from memory. So that shows you how ingrained it still is in our head because, like you said, this movie's almost 50 years old.
Yeah.
Rosie O'Donnell quoted the trailer for this on her 90s television show and raved about how it terrified her as a child. So it's not just us.
No.
Yeah, Rosie is a celebrity, obviously, but I'm sure it affected many, many more. And it was nice of her to give voice to it in the 90s. Scenes.
All of them. I say that a lot in movies that I really like, but I do think the movie starts out slow, like you said. The whole beginning part with his mentor, because he's a magician's assistant who's been learning this slowly, and he's doing his first night and obviously bombs pretty badly and lies about it. But it looks good on a second watch, but I think it'll be slow to a lot of people now. And that whole, all the New York buildup and everything, it's not really until he gets to the cabin that a lot of the great scenes are. I mean, Fats' intro is good because we see it through the eyes of the TV producer guy who arrives, and the Burgess Meredith character is like, just wait and see, just wait and see. And he's being very mysterious about it or smoking a cigar. And so we see Fats at the same time that the producer sees Fats, which is cool and a good way to introduce him.
I have a scene that I wish was in the movie.
Oh, okay.
Before I get into ones that are already there. I mentioned earlier, I have some issue with the passage of time. It's a little confusing in the beginning because they show his failure and his conversation with his mentor who says you need a gimmick. Then they show him with the gimmick and the agent trying to get him the TV deal in the audience. They never showed the transition of success where he's already been on Carson and done this and done that. Now he's going to get a TV deal. And I was like, it just went from failure to the TV deal without showing what came in between. And I felt a little confused about it because I thought, oh, maybe this is his big break, but he's already had a big break. The television thing would just take him further.
Yeah, I'm curious why they didn't even have a little chyron or a lower third or something that said like 18 months later or blah, blah, blah. That would have, I think, really communicated it.
Or
I
just
don't
a
know why
montage of talk shows.
Yeah, but then you would have seen Fats.
You would have seen Fats, and they wanted it to be a surprise for that one
Yeah.
scene. Yeah, you're
But
right.
see, I think you easily could have said 18 months later or something like that, and then show the studio exec drive up, go to the club, blah, 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 all
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
And we would
But
have
that's my
bought
only
it
gripe.
better. I agree. I agree with you.
I mean, that and that I don't know that you would die from being stabbed by a pocket knife. That
The Ben Green character survives beaten to death, drowned,
Okay.
all these
All right,
different
now you're
things.
leading up to one of my favorite scenes, and I go for the scares, of course. And you think that Ben Green is dead, and Anthony Hopkins is swimming with him out to the center of the lake to weigh him down, and all of a sudden he wakes up. That scene. It's
Yeah.
like he is not dead. He is reaching over and trying to grab you.
Yep.
Woo. Good scene. Good twist.
Yeah, that's a good scene.
Yeah.
Good
You know,
twist.
because you're not expecting it. You know, you think he's dead.
Even though we don't buy the pocket knife death and the throat slash, that is a scary scene as well.
When he kills Duke.
Yes.
Yeah.
That whole
Because it
scene is
looks
good.
like Fats does it.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
It's
yeah.
he's behind a curtain and the dummy has the knife in his hand and he just stabs him.
The figure, Tim. Fats is not a dummy. So
I better not call him a dummy. He'll haunt me in my dreams, I'm sure.
That's right. The Fats taking control scene, I love. I think Anthony Hopkins' performance is brilliant. And doing all this stuff like, come on, schmucko, and doing the, don't start the migraine now. It's just so good.
And to think that he's just having a conversation with himself.
Yes.
It's so disturbing.
And the music is doing those little harp glisses and all that stuff that builds up to stand up, crawl on the floor, touch the ceiling, get a knife. And he goes, and everything stops. Get a knife. Just, oh my God.
Yeah.
And that was a great scene.
That's a great scene.
The ending is a great scene.
You mean when he's left the heart outside the door, or
no? Well, that's freaking scary. But I
you're
thought
talking
you
about
would
their
like that
final
one.
converson.
Yeah, on the sofa, or on the floor in front of the sofa. Yeah,
and Corky. Yeah, yeah, that is a great scene. I love it. I love that it's shot at a distance and they're opposite each other and opposite each side of the screen.
Yeah,
and I like the scene where, and I don't understand some of. What is Anne Margaret's character's name? Peggy.
Peggy Ann Snow.
Yeah, I don't understand some of her motivation for falling in love with him after that scene with the card trick at the table. I was like, oh my God, he has clearly got some anger issues.
Well, from storytelling, I was wondering if there was a scene or two missing or something in there, because I agree. My only negative I really have is with some of her motivation and some of her inflex. She seems almost too childishly girly. Part of it is coquettish and kind of cute, and you think, oh, she's just, but other times it's like, is she like a dumb blonde cheerleader? In the way Anne Margaret says some of her lines.
I have theories about that.
Okay.
I think it's got to do with her background, because that's how she started playing characters.
Oh,
because
okay.
Yeah, she was like a sex kitten. She was in Elvis Presley movies as the female object of desire. And I think it's part of her transition. I guess segueing into cast again, but I didn't take her seriously until Carnal Knowledge, the movie with Jack Nicholson and Candice Bergen.
Yep.
And then I started thinking, oh yeah, she's a great dramatic actress. But maybe some of the old teenage stuff creeped in places. I don't know. Or maybe they thought
see that.
Maybe she was trying to look younger. I don't know. She's still acting. I saw her on the Comiskey Method. She's great.
Oh yeah, she's really good. Yeah.
Anyway, here I am back in cast. So those are my scenes. And like you said, God, there's a lot of good scenes. That scene with him and Duke on the boat. It's like, what the hell is going to happen? Because you think Duke's going to kill him. But no, Duke's fishing, and then you think, oh my God, he's going to pull the body up. It's like completely, it constantly points you in a different direction. And then at the very end of the scene, instead of them finding the body, they see it from a distance on the shore.
Some great writing because of the
Classic
conflict between
misdirection.
them.
Yeah.
Misdirection all over it. His voice even breaks when he goes, I think I'm losing her, Cork. When you're going, dude, what?
Yeah.
I didn't expect that. I expected a gun or you to beat me with a hammer.
Yeah. Get the fuck off out of here or I'm going to kill you, basically. Yeah.
So that was like another strong scene. Well, the scene in the kitchen is good too. His essentially introduction to Duke, because we don't know
what Duke knows.
What lie is going to be shown or telegraphed or whatever. Because this is after he slept with his wife and now but he brings Fats with him to help him.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. So yeah.
And any scene with Burgess Meredith, who is just phenomenal.
Oh,
and
one of his best roles ever, I think.
And you know he's not bald. He shaved his head to look like that.
Yep.
He was never like a balding actor, really. He's trying to look like Swifty Lazar, the famous agent in Hollywood. That was
his key.
Aggressive. Mm-hmm. I guess that we could go ahead and segue to cast because we've talked about every scene in the damn movie.
And all the cast, too.
Well, and the cast is probably one of the stronger things. We have Hannibal Lecter himself, Anthony Hopkins, playing Corky. You mentioned The Line of Winter. That's the first thing I can think of him from, but he's got 150 credits since then, including that.
And still going.
And that's not even including what he's done on stage. Do you know who the original choice was for Corky?
Gene Wilder?
Yes. Isn't that weird? Gene has a disturbing, all comedians have a disturbing underlayer. Most do anyway.
Of the comedians of the time, or even since then, he's probably one that I could see do this role. Robin Williams went on and did some very dramatic movies and was very good. I couldn't see Robin Williams in this role, even though he does have a darker, more dramatic side to him.
Very true.
I couldn't see him do this.
Well, he would be so manic, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart.
Gene Wilder, I could, just because even as Willie, there's a dark side to him that works. Mm-hmm. And in Young Frankenstein, same thing, when he gets that crazed look in his eyes. But I think the thing I read about was it was Levine who didn't want. And he said he didn't want any comedians.
No, Attenborough and Goldman wanted Gene Wilder. It was Levine that put his foot down and said no comedians.
Good. I'm glad he did. It was a smart decision. I think a comedian would have taken us out of the realism of the psychosis or whatever.
Yeah, I agree. Excuse me. I mentioned that some of the other choices were Jack Nicholson and Robert De Niro, but apparently Dustin Hoffman was in there at some point too.
Yeah, well.
And then in the closing credits, Hopkins is billed first and fifth place as both Corky and Fats.
Yeah.
Very cute.
Because so much of the dialogue is him. He did it all.
Right.
So, yeah.
Anne Margaret, I love her. I actually watched Tommy recently. I have not.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And she was nominated for an Oscar for that film.
Well, she's great in it.
I don't think that movie holds up well. It's Ken Russell, and Ken Russell's of the. I mean, I love Ken Russell. He's got a special place in my heart, but he's not for everybody.
Well, they did a movie version of Les Mis, and everybody's great in it except for, what's his name?
Daniel Day-Lewis?
No. He's not in Les Mis. Les Mis is Hugh Jackman. But
that's right.
Who played Gladiator?
Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe. He tries to sing in it, and he's terrible. And when it first came out and everybody was making fun of him, I was going, okay, well, then go to Tommy and watch Oliver Reed try to sing. Come on.
Pete Townsend was not on board with Oliver Reed, but he was one of Ken Russell's favorites. So,
and Tommy is the Who trying to do The Wall. I mean, come on. It's the same
Before
thing.
The Wall, yeah, and it's not good. It's just not a great movie. But back to Anne Margaret, she was nominated for an Oscar. She's the best thing in that movie. She and Elton John are probably the best things in that movie. I thought she got her start with Elvis in Viva Las Vegas, but she actually started 2 years earlier in State Fair with Pat Boone. So she went from Pat Boone, Mr. Clean, to Elvis, who was Mr. Dirty,
Swinging his hips and
in 2
stuff.
years. Yeah, those
Wow.
hips. Like I said, she started off as a sex symbol, but then crossed over into serious roles with Carnal Knowledge. William Goldman, in his book Five Screenplays, said Burgess Meredith was perfect and Hopkins was also wonderful, but he thinks Anne Margaret was the least appreciated of the three because he thinks that she is one of the best emotional actresses he's ever seen.
Yes, she is very expressive. That scene with Duke, which is a one-off scene, it's the old abused wife who's lying about her affair. There's so much in her eyes and what she says of, I love him, but I hate him. I hate myself. This is terrible. I want to tell him, but I shouldn't tell him, but I should tell him. It's a great scene.
Yeah.
And she's really good in it. That's why, to me, it doesn't work when in the next scene she's going, hey, Cork, la, 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 la. And she's like this little lightness to it. And I was going, that doesn't, you seem immature in that scene.
Maybe she was trying to balance out the negativity. I don't know.
Oh, maybe.
I like the scenes where she is very matter of fact with Duke too. Oh yeah, it's real charming when you've been drinking or whatever it is.
Yeah.
She's like mad. It's quite clear they're an unhappy couple. Ben Green, also known as Gangrene, was played by Burgess Meredith. And I don't think I mentioned it, but we were talking about Laurence Olivier earlier, and Laurence Olivier was slated to play Ben in this, but he had to drop out because he was sick.
He actually died fairly soon after this, I think.
He did Dracula, though, the next year.
Yeah, but remember when we covered Dracula,
You're right.
We talked about how ill he was.
And Dracula was probably filmed in
him.
78. Yeah. You're right. Burgess Meredith, we just saw him last season in Burnt Offerings playing something Allardyce. I can't remember. Mr. Allardyce? No, Arnold Allardyce. But he's more famous for playing Rocky's manager and very famous in that Twilight Zone episode, Time Enough at Last. And it's not the last time we're going to be seeing him this season. We've got another movie he's in too. So
cool.
Yeah, that's to look forward to. Duke is played by Ed Lauder, who is a wonderful character actor that we saw last in Space, your episode of the X-Files that you like and I don't.
Yep, that one. Because it has to do with space.
On our sideshow over on Patreon, folks. That's what we're referring to. He was in an X-Files episode. However, he could have been my father. I don't know if you know this.
No, I don't.
Had I gotten the role I auditioned for in Goodbye, Miss 4th of July of a racist young boy, he was the racist young boy's father. I ended up being an extra in that movie. So we have done a movie together.
There you go.
Ed Lauder's in that movie.
Yeah.
It's an old Disney movie, made for Disney television movie that is not very good. E.J. Andre played Merlin. I have really nothing on him. Do you?
I had seen him before. I did not look him up because you normally do casting. So
yeah.
I didn't look
I think I looked him up, and it was just that he was just like another character actor that we really didn't know that much of. However, very briefly, the network executive that Burgess Meredith is showing Corky to get him a TV deal is played by David Ogden Stiers.
Yep.
Who we know as Winchester from MASH. I looked him up, and he did some 1990s Disney movies that I was unaware of. He narrated Beauty and the Beast and was Governor Ratcliffe in Pocahontas. So he went over to the Disney side of the coin.
Yep.
That is all I have really on cast. We've already talked enough about cast. We were talking about it when we started. However, as far as awards, this movie, the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror nominated it for Best Horror Film, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor, Burgess Meredith, and Music. Burgess Meredith won the award for Best Supporting Actor. But you want to know what the film is that won, and it totally confuses me. For Best Horror Film, The Wicker Man. And It came out in 1973. So do you think that it didn't come to America till 5 years later? And maybe that's why?
Would have to be. The only reason I think it would fall into the criteria to be judged.
Of
So that's
1978 instead of 1973. I don't understand how The Wicker Man won. I understand why. I love that movie. So if it won in 1973, I wouldn't be surprised at all. It surprises me that it won in 1978. But you want to know what else it beat besides
sure.
Magic? Halloween and Dawn of the Dead. I'm
Wow.
like, wow, that's three big movies to choose from. Not
In 1
Wicker
year.
Man,
Yeah.
but Magic, Halloween, and Dawn of the Dead all came out in 1978. Wow.
Dang.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hopkins got nominated for a BAFTA and a Golden Globe. So the English version of the Oscars were already recognizing performances in horror films. I think
I
that
think
says
they've
a
had
lot.
yeah. Oh, yeah. It says a lot.
And Goldman received a Poe Award, which makes perfect sense because that's more of a writing award, and he's known as being a multi talented writer in different aspects of the career. This movie is not on the 1001 movies you must see before you die list, and that disappoints me a little bit.
Me too. I would definitely put it on there as one of it's definitely up there in my list of horror movies.
And strong performances.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have a couple of trivias before we jump to keys, just stuff
Okay.
that I found. One is, so what really is FATS, or what really is the disorder? There's talk online that this is a form of dissociative identity disorder, meaning split personality, essentially is what they used to call it. Now they call it this. Schizophrenia, because we're only hearing that voice talk to him. And another theory was that it's a tulpa, an imaginary friend, which David Lynch, the whole new Twin Peaks has to do with tulpas. So I thought that was a
What
weird
is a
twist to
culpa?
it. Tulpa, Tulpa.
A tulpa?
I think
What
it's
is
an
that?
Indian term for an imaginary friend that has
Okay.
power over you. So let's see. It took 2 months to build FATS, the dummy, to look like the figure. Sorry, to look like Anthony Hopkins. Let's see.
I don't think he really looks like Anthony Hopkins to me, but he's his
well, I
own
mean,
person.
yeah, I think he, especially in those when he's right beside him in some of those close-ups with those blue
Well,
eyes, and
they definitely dress alike. He wears like the same sweater sometimes and
well, he does
things.
that on purpose, yeah,
Yeah.
to dress like the figure. When we were talking scenes, we didn't talk about one of the best scenes. You said Burgess Meredith in any scene he's in, but that scene where he says, "Make Fat shut up" for
For
5 minutes,
5 minutes.
is a great scene.
That was one
And
of the
I've got
scenes
it.
I remembered before I started the movie. That's one that stuck in my head from the 70s. Yeah.
And he's just taking out the cigar and leaning back and then looking at his watch. Corky's doing the whole, how long's it been? 30 seconds, kid. Okay. Yeah, sure. But the way Attenborough finally does the shot showing Corky sitting there, and then the camera just pans around, and suddenly Fats comes into the foreground.
The silhouette of
they both
Fats's
kind
face.
of merge in profile.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah,
it's like,
so
where
well
did this
done.
guy go to film school? Because he is amazing for not doing that many movies. That picture behind me looks like the television commercial, except it's not lit from the front. It's lit from the
Right.
side, and you only see half his face, and it is really creepy. Yeah.
And I've got some of my watch notes or stuff like, I love the fact that they treat this as realism. Love the fact that after Ben Green is hit, you hear moaning and you think it's him, and the camera pans past him and it's Fats who's moaning. And Corky goes to pick him up and he goes, "My head hurts."
Yeah.
And everything. Boat scene is great. Oh, I've got in my quotes, "I'll tell."
Mm-hmm.
It still chills me every time I hear it.
That line and the line about get a knife are like two of the lines that Fats have that stick out immediately. Yeah.
Yes. And I've got another line, Corky, really pathetic and sad, saying it was never me, only us. And there's that pause, and Fats goes, "Schmucko, us is you." And you go, what? And he goes, us was you. It's just, yeah, so good. The theme song I've got again, because I love that theme song and the way he orchestrated it all the way through. So trivia, you did one of mine, which is Ben Green was based on Swifty Lazar, who was an agent, a big agent in Hollywood.
Correct. I meant to mention that with Burgess, and I guess I didn't put it in my cast notes.
But you did it before that.
Yeah, I did. I brought it. It just came to mind. But yeah.
And my trivia says that this is Anne Margaret's one and only horror movie.
Interesting. I wonder why that is.
I researched that to find out, but
a lot of people don't like horror movies. My husband doesn't like them. He won't watch them.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm sure there's actors out there that don't want to be in them.
My wife hates them. She won't watch them. She goes, I don't understand why people even like this. What's the point? That's why on Patreon, that's one of the things we're going to talk about is why do people like horror movies? Why do people like science fiction?
Barbara, come over to the dark side. Yeah, I can't get Dennis to watch them. He'll catch one occasionally if I'm watching one, but he'll leave the room.
Yeah.
I don't have any trivia. The only trivia I had is what you already mentioned, which was him learning the art of ventriloquism and actually doing all that kind of stuff himself.
Yeah. Yeah. What dedication. That's great.
I have keys. A lot of them are horror movies, but some of them are other movies that Fats references in his dialogue.
That's a good one.
He spouts off a million of them when Anthony Hopkins finally cannot last 5 minutes without talking, and all of a sudden he's just like blah, 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 and just spitting them all out. But he does lines from like All About Eve, About a Bumpy Night. He does lines at one point. He does the line from Yankee Doodle Dandy about my father thanks you, my mother thank you, my sister thank you, and I thank you. And I just watched that movie the other day, and I was like, oh, I forgot about that line. Yeah. Those are not really keys as much as they are little Easter eggs, I guess you would say, from classic film.
Well, I think you've already said the ultimate key for this, which is Psycho, of a character that we follow all the way through the film. Well, not all the way through in Psycho, but most of the way through the film, and ends up being, and we think there's a secondary personality or whatever, and it turns out to be the same person doing both roles.
Well, yes. And there are two other movies that come to mind that are very similar. Sybil would be one. And Sisters, the Brian De Palma movie we covered a couple of seasons ago.
I had a few of those too, and a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
Well, Sisters I definitely had. Wasn't Dead Ringers? Weren't they both? Or were they Siamese twins that were? They
were Siamese twins that were separated. I haven't seen that movie in so long. I can't remember. But
so was Sisters, right? Except that she died in Sisters.
Yeah, and aren't both brothers alive in Dead Ringers?
I thought they were, but I don't know. That's why I have a question about it.
It's been so long since I saw that movie, I can't really remember it.
Same thing with Baby Jane. Baby Jane is she's just schizophrenic, right? She's just crazy.
She's just mean.
But there's not another personality,
no,
right?
No.
Okay.
There was a Baby Jane doll, but that's just because she was really popular.
So the three that I have that are splits are Primal Fear, which is that great one with, I can't remember the actor right now, but he's really good. And that's the one where he's a multiple serial killer. He's on trial.
Isn't it Richard Gere? Or Edward Norton?
I think Richard Gere's the attorney.
Edward Norton is the
character.
Killer, yeah.
And we think he's innocent until like the last 10 minutes of the movie when he totally switches personalities and after he's been gotten.
That's got Laura Linney in it too. I know that movie. Yeah. That's a good movie.
It's a good movie.
Yeah.
Black Swan, where she has the dark personality that does all of the mischief and bad stuff and murders. And she's actually the White Swan. And correct, because it's been so long since I've seen it, isn't she split in Vertigo, or is she just a sister?
I don't know what I mean? That either. I have taped that to rewatch it, and I haven't watched it yet, but it's been a long time.
It's probably my least rewatched of Hitchcock.
It is mine too, because it's a little confusing.
Yeah, I'll end up watching North by Northwest before I watch Vertigo. So correct me out there, listeners, if I'm wrong, but I think she was his obsession with her is because she looks just like the one that was killed. And it's really the same person, just a different personality. She
It's
faked
funny
her
that you
own
said
death.
it's your least watched. My most watched is Strangers on a Train.
Mm. I
But
even like Topaz more than I like Vertigo, but that's just me.
well, and we're
So
gonna have one maybe coming up this season.
we might. We might. Other keys. So those are my split keys that I had. And then you've got, of course, the figure slash dummy slash puppet keys.
Sorry, I got interrupted by my phone. I
Okay.
have Alien,
Alien. What would be a key in Alien? What would be I don't,
Murder
the
in front
the
of a cat.
murder in front of a cat.
The cat comes out of the house when he's killing Ben
Oh
and is
yeah.
in the woods. The cat is the witness to the murder, is what I'm trying to say. And
Oh,
there's
that's
the
a good
scene in
one.
Alien where the cat is the witness to Harry Dean Stanton's murder.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. They have said in general, I think Goldman said that his inspiration for this was Dead of Night, 1945, which is another ventriloquist scary movie. Probably the first one because it's in 45. But wait, The Great Gabbo I have on my list, and it was in 29, again with a possessed ventriloquist dummy.
Right. And then there was lots of TV things, like you said, with the Twilight Zone and Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
Yeah, Devil Doll, all
Actually,
those.
I think the dummy is the Alfred Hitchcock Presents. I don't think that's a movie.
Right,
It's
it
the
is a
episode of
Hitchcock.
Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and Cliff Robertson's in it.
Mm-hmm. In
Yeah,
1972. 62. Sorry, 62. Yep.
62. Right.
Mm-hmm.
However, there is a movie, and I got from IMDb, called The Glass Eye from
Mm-hmm.
1957. That's a low budget British movie. There's one called Devil Doll, if we're getting into the dummies movies.
Yeah.
And apparently there was one recently that I don't remember, called Dead Silence from 2007.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
I haven't either. I don't remember it. But I think the one that is the biggest though is, and you mentioned, is Dead of Night, where Michael Redgrave plays the ventriloquist.
Yeah.
You did mention that, didn't you? I think you
Yep.
did.
Dead of
Yeah.
Night, 1945.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And we covered that on this podcast. That was probably one of the better stories in that movie.
It was, because that was
Yeah.
the anthology one, right?
It was. And it's
Yeah.
the one where at the end, all the crazy stuff starts happening. All the like
Oh, yeah.
kaleidoscope and people crowding in on
Mm-hmm.
him, and the dummy gets up and walks across the jail cell or something toward him.
Yeah, he's really lost his marbles.
Yeah. It is crazy. But I don't really have any other keys. Oh, you know what? I have one big key.
Hmm?
Is a Hopkins key, and I'm going to say Silence of the Lambs, because he is playing a mentally challenged murderer in this one, and I would say it's safe to say that Hannibal Lecter has some hang-ups that are mental. But not only the fact that Anthony Hopkins is so skilled to play these multi-dimensional characters, but a lot of this movie looks like Silence of the Lambs. When they're at the cabin on the lake, it's like almost like that gray filter look
Yeah,
of
I see that.
silence. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So I
There's
think
not
silence is a
any
good key.
there's not any sunlight in this movie. Everything is an overcast day or an overcast afternoon or
Mm-hmm.
cloudy. Yeah, very fall. There was a Buffy episode called The Puppet Show, which was about a ventriloquist dummy again.
Oh, what it's called, the Puppet Show?
Yep, The Puppet Show, and it was I think it was in the first season.
I
And
seem to
then
remember that.
I've got that R.L. Stine said that he was inspired by this for a story he did called Slappy, which was one of his, I guess, Goosebumps stories. And it was about a ventriloquist dummy as well. Figure. Sorry. Little person.
I'm just going to put R.L. Stein slap in
Yeah.
Maybe I can
And
find
those
it.
are all my keys. This trope of having a doll that is possessed, or are we projecting our personality on it, of course, has led to all the Annabelle franchise, whatever. And there's also other ones that are like that, I'm sure. That whole trope of a possessed doll, even down to Trilogy of Terror, for that matter.
Right. Except it's not possessed by the person. It was demonically possessed.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the whole thing with the Annabelle. It's a demon, not a person.
That's why I don't even
But
think I would connect like Chucky or Annabelle or even Trilogy of Terror to this because they're supernatural movies, and this really isn't a supernatural movie.
but this one does the line so that we don't know. That's what makes it work. Like what I said in my notes, that I love the fact that they treated this so realistically. So if we wanted to think, oh, it's an evil doll, then halfway through we realize, oh no, it's not an evil doll, it's him. He's a Looney Tune. Crazy. Or a mental illness.
This may be subconsciously, but because I was only 13 and probably 14 when I saw it, I think it was the first movie that I went into thinking it was going to be a supernatural horror movie, but was not disappointed
Mm.
that it wasn't because it was
Ooh, well
that
said.
good.
Well
Yeah,
said.
because normally a young kid would be disappointed to find out that dummy's not real. But when you see how strong Anthony Hopkins' performance is and that he is the killer, it blows you away, especially that scene at the end when he's given himself supposedly a mortal wound with a pocket knife. And
Hmm.
Fats is like, oh, my stomach hurts. And
Yeah.
they're
And he
having
goes
that
over
conversation.
and they're having this whole conversation, and he goes over, he goes, I'm cold. And he pulls him down with him and everything else. And the whole, I don't want to go first because
Who
I
do
don't
you
want to be
think will go
alone.
first? I
Yeah.
think we'll go together.
I think we'll go together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
It's
when they
great.
die and it's lights out, you think, that's the end. That's great. Then you hear Anne Margaret say, Corky, I've changed my mind. I'm coming.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, this is
Yeah.
awful. It's like Shakespearean tragedy.
Very, very William Goldman. Very well done writing.
Yeah.
And I also thought, I wanted to look it up. Maybe you did. The rhyme that was on the poster and the trailer,
Hmm.
I assuming comes from the book,
I
because it
have no idea.
literally is the plot of the movie in 4 stanzas. It literally is the plot, because magic is fun, we're dead.
I do remember reading it as a blurb on the book, but it was the movie tie-in, so I'm not really sure. I read that he wanted to use 3 phrases that are specifically identified with magic, and it's Abra Cadabra, Hocus Pocus, Presto-Chango are the 3 that
Hmm.
he uses. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's the whole plot of the movie. Sit on his knee, take her to bed, all that. It's so I
Magic is
thought that was very
fun.
clever.
We're dead.
Yeah. So
Well, I think it's safe to say that we both like this movie. We think this movie
yes.
should be on the 1001 movies you must see before you die. And if not, it should definitely be on your list out there to watch. If you have not seen this movie, it is playing on several streaming apps as well as Turner Classic Movies. It's considered a classic. And
And if you've made it all the way through and are listening to us, then you know all about it anyway. Why would you do that without watching the movie? We don't understand these things. Let us know down below in the
right.
credit. No. and if you like what you heard today, we have a plethora of other films that we have covered over the past 7 years, and you can find those on the website. We also have a Patreon channel where we have other episodes and other things that we do. We have 2 other long-standing or long-running podcasts, which are X-Files Declassified, where we examine every episode of the X-Files, and then the original Star Trek, the original series. But we also have some other stuff on there for, as you go up in the tiers, you get more stuff and more fun, and it also
Yeah,
helps us
there's
keep it
free
going.
stuff and subscription-based stuff over there, and the degrees go up as far as shows and stuff. If you see a show you want to watch, see what
Yep.
where it lies. So
And we would love to have your support in any way, please. Even if you can go to Apple and give us a 3-word review, that helps us, at least more people like us, cinephile-ish people, find the podcast and or the YouTube channel. So we appreciate that. And Tim, what do we? Until next time, I guess we're gonna
be in
stay
scary
October?
territory for a while because it's
Woo-hoo!
October.
It's October.
I can't remember what's next though.
But it's going to be scary.
It's a sci-fi thriller, so we're
Oh,
going to be in
look at him
sci-fi
with
land,
food.
but it's going to be
Nah,
scary. I chose what I hope will be scary.
We shall see.
Yeah, I will see you then.
All right. See you then.
All right.
Can't start the car. Johnny has the key.